This is the, of course, end of month live stream that I do. I call it loose ends to tie up any loose ends from the previous 3 to 6 weeks whenever I have the time. This time is actually timely, right after the month ended. That's why it is stated to be the one for January. And I got to say that this time, I've got quite a lot to get through here. I almost was worried I wouldn't have that much to talk about this week, but I actually have a ton to talk about this week. And so let's get right into it, because I would say that the leaks that I'm going to put out today are actually very important ones. But of course, also put in your questions now, especially if you want me to notice them, put a little tip, and then I will be more likely to read it. But don't wait, put it in now, and I will then go through them after I get through this leak. But anyways, let's not waste any more time. Let us get right into it. So, yes, today I saw the rumors that the way I would summarize it, right? Because as usual with tech reporting, half of the websites report the same news different ways. But the way I would summarize people talking about it is that RTX 50 Super was pushed back even further, and that the 60 series was delayed to like 2028. At least that's how most people are interpreting the information that came from, I believe, a website called The Information. So here's what I can say. I got more feedback from my sources than I thought I would this quick, right? I reached out to people in the afternoon, and I actually got feedback from 4 different sources. So let me just run through what they said, and then I'll give you my opinion of what is going on. And no, I'm not going to put quotes on screen. Nobody wanted to be direct quoted on this one because of how sensitive it is. But anyways, the first one came from an Nvidia AIB. The person said that last they were told by Nvidia, the RTX 60 series is coming out in 2027. Another source of mine, actually one of my longest running sources that works with NVIDIA professional graphics teams, this person told me that late 2027 was still the plan, at least for when they would probably get the next generation of professional NVIDIA graphics. And so that would also be the same dies they use for the top end 6090, still told 2027. Another source, this person is a close retail partner of NVIDIA, said that they specifically think that the report that was put out may have confused different products. You know, this person didn't say they could prove it, but what they were hearing is that the RTX 60 series is launching in 2027, possibly even mid 2027 or something, and that they'd be very surprised if it slipped to 28. And just the way they read the report, they're like, this seems like they confused a different product. Now, another source, and this one is actually somebody who works at NVIDIA, told me that 2028 sounds too late. And this person also insisted that the report was wrong. Now, here's what I'm going to say. I don't know anything about that website. I do know that some people vouch for that website. So this isn't an attempt by me to say they're wrong or attack them or anything. All I can do is take the information that I get and report it back to you. And my summary of it is that anything can happen, but it is my opinion that no decision has been made to delay the 60 series yet. At least not one that has been reported to all of NVIDIA's partners and set in stone. And frankly speaking, that sort of a decision could not have been made by now anyways. At most, what you would see is NVIDIA saying it's not coming out soon and will update you to their partners or something, because 2028 is 2 years away. And a lot of this is all going to depend on how big the AI bubble still is. Is it growing? Has it popped? Is NVIDIA able to actually finally meet demand so they can produce more graphics cards for gamers as well? That sort of a decision can't be made until about a year before you make the cut, right? So that's not going to be made for about at least, I'd say, probably a year, if not half a year. So that's what I would say. I don't believe it's set in stone that the 60 series is coming out in 2028. It could. I don't think it's set in stone. And all I would say is if that does happen, well, this gets me to another kind of leak here that I think is very important, because the way people are reporting on NVIDIA supply is missing a bit of nuance here. So I was told directly also this week by one of my best sources that RAM is not the bottleneck for NVIDIA for the most part anymore. Apparently, it's TSMC. And I did report this actually in my, what was it? My 5060 effectively, production pause leak or something that I put out 2 weeks ago. I was told, I should say I was told, and then I said back then that Nvidia overbooked their AI orders. Now, what does that mean though? Because I think a lot of people haven't really latched on to what that means. That means that TSMC, therefore, is pretty much the bottleneck, that Nvidia signed too many deals with AI partners. And so they had to cut 50 series gaming graphics card production and use those wafers to make AI products instead. That is basically what's going on. That means it's not the RAM, right? I know that's unbelievable to some people, right, to hear this, but when we talk about RAM shortages in the consumer space, which obviously there are, and it's very bad right now, well, what's causing the RAM shortages? It wasn't a tsunami in Asia or something. No, it's because the AI companies bought up all the RAM. That means they have the RAM. They have RAM. They bought it. That's why you can't get it. They have it. The bottleneck right now for Nvidia is TSMC. That's their bottleneck. That's what I'm told lately. And they just booked far, 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 far too many orders. So yeah, that's basically what's going on. And so through that lens, though, could I see the 60 series being delayed? Could I see the 50 Super series being delayed, but still coming out like beginning of 27 because it's still going to be another year and a half after that when the 60 series comes? And that's why it's a stopgap that's basically launching as a new generation. Yes, that is plausible. That could happen because I have heard, of course, that they've just overbooked TSMC supply, but I don't believe that decision's been made yet. I don't believe so. Okay. And again, the only person that really would know this is like 10 people at the top of Nvidia right now, pretty much. I mean, at least, yeah, that would have to be true because again, I've talked to people who work at Nvidia, people who work with Nvidia, people in retail. There's not been some order given, meaning that if this is true again, this delay of the 60 and 50 Super Series, it's because it was floated in some conversation as potentially happening somewhere very high up, but I don't believe it's been set in stone. Uh, just too far out for that to happen. So, yeah, that's my update on what's going on with the Nvidia 50 Super and 60 series. Could it be delayed? Sure, could. I've already told you why it would be based on what I'm hearing that TSMC is the bottleneck right now, but I don't believe the decision was made yet. All right, now I want to move on actually to something else here. Let me put down another timestamp for future viewers, and that has to do with Intel and Intel Panther Lake. Now, I've been talking about this a lot on Twitter. Of course, I put out a video that leaked this, but let me put this on screen here because I really think that we need to share screen window there. Let me make sure there's nothing on screen here that gives me away. All right. So yeah, here it is. So this, right? I put these tweets out the other day and I basically said, remember that B&H photography Panther Lake laptop that was $1,300. And I remember this because I shared it on Broken Silicon, right? The news episode with Dan. You know, remember this thing that everyone was sharing? Discontinued. It's gone. And then I also looked on B&H photography and I saw, if you actually want Panther Lake at B&H, at least as of when I checked this a day ago, this is what the cost is right now. Okay. So that's what made me put out this sort of a report. And then there was feedback, from someone, I don't know who runs the Twitter, who specifically at Hardware Connect said this. And I want to be clear that I've liked a lot of recent reporting out of Hardware Connect. So this isn't meant to be some feud with the channel. God bless them. That's not my point here. But my point is this: when you share these products like they did, and they're like, oh, it's this price. If you actually scroll down on the picture before this person cut it off, you will see that it is unavailable. It is unavailable. And I'm not going to go through the rest of the Twitter exchange. The point is that then the Hardware Canucks account replied because it sold out. And then I replied, yeah, it sold out because there was basically no supply of it. And then made an example of this. Do you think the RTX 5080 is really $1,000 because one guy somewhere bought it for $1,000 once? No. Use your eyes. Check Newegg. The 5080 is not $1,000. That is the same with Panther Lake, right? There were token models, just like I reported there would be, that were very low volume, sold out instantly. And if you got it for that price, I think you got a phenomenal deal. Good for you. But that's not most people. And just because the MSRP is there, or one guy bought one laptop for that price, that does not mean that's the average price of Panther Lake, which all I've ever reported about Panther Lake is average price. I didn't even say it would start at $2,000. Not what I said. I'm just saying I talked to a retailer who gave me access to a ton of data. I averaged the price. The average as of a week ago is 2,100. But it gets worse because I've gotten more stuff from retail sources of mine, including stuff that was documents, things in writing. It wasn't just like I was talking to them about it. But prices are going up on Panther Lake even more than what I was told, pretty much. Or I guess the way I would put it is I can't promise you what the average price of a Panther Lake laptop will be in a month, but I can tell you that laptops that were planned to launch in a month, and I was shown this. I was shown this in the back end of a major retailer, like previous price in one column, and then it said updating to this, and they were all going up in price, dozens to hundreds of dollars. So I would recommend people don't double down on the claim that Panther Lake's going to be cheaper than what we're seeing right now on average, because I know for a fact in the back end at some retailers, they are raising the price right now, literally raising the price before they even announce the prices. And I don't know. I'm not sure exactly why, but I think we can guess it's probably linked to RAM and Intel having to spend extra for it or something. And Panther Lake requires very fast memory to perform well. So that makes it pretty hard for them there. So that's what I would say is, Panther Lake, will some models be below 2,000? Sure. Maybe you'll see some for 1,500 or whatever, but I'm not getting the feeling that this thing is going to be a Gorgon Point competitor in price. Well, unless Gorgon Point ends up being in $2,000 laptops on average because of RAM pricing. I guess we'll have to see. Who knows? Everything's terrible. But I just wanted to make sure you guys all knew that, because yeah, it's pretty much a Strix Halo competitor for the most part in pricing. Now, a Strix Halo competitor with way more options, not just 3 laptops to choose from like Strix Halo. I'm not pretending that's not an issue for AMD, but that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. AMD getting enough laptop wins for Strix Halo. That's not the same issue as price. When it comes to price, go to Best Buy right now. Strix Halo is about $2,200. So is Panther Lake. They're about the same price. Ipso facto. There you go. And because of that, I think Intel could run into some pretty big issues with Panther Lake this year, potentially, because they really do need some of these to be the good ones. I mean, like if you go to Dell's website, you can get a $1,600 Panther Lake laptop, and it comes with like only 4 big cores. Yep, that's right. No little cores, just 4 big cores and 4 low power cores, and like 4 execution units. And if that's $1,600, oh, and to add insult to injury, it was 16 gigabytes of RAM and a half terabyte system. What a joke at 1,600. I'm sorry. Like, if that's what's going to happen, uh, I talk about this in a die shrink that comes out tomorrow for Moore's Law's Dead patrons. But we both agreed, like, as much as I think Panther Lake is, definitely competitive with Strix Halo, depending on the system better, depending on what you want worse, in raw performance when plugged in. But you could argue it's better in some way, in a lot of ways, actually. Uh, but it's not comparable to Gorgon Point. It's just better than Gorgon Point in general, at least if you have just the APU and no dedicated graphics card added on top. That's true, but if there's a Panther Lake system with like 16 gigabytes of RAM, I would get Gorgon Point, Kraken, Hawk Point, Lunar Lake for the same price with more RAM. Like, and that's a big problem for Panther Lake. It's not enough that the cheaper models are cheaper. The cheaper models also, with like the weaker Panther Lake, the weaker XE graphics, that's not enough to have like $2,000 for the good one, and let's say $1,200 or $1,000 for the 4XE model. That model still has to come with 32 gigabytes of RAM to make any sense, or I would recommend a whole host of other options from both Intel and AMD over that for a similar price. Like, let's say, I mean, again, join the Moore's Law's Dead Patreon. We're going to have a whole hour episode come out discussing what's going on with APUs this year. But a discussion me and Dan have in that episode that comes out tomorrow is we literally say to each other, $1,500. Let's say a laptop's $1,500, and but one of them is Panther Lake, even if it's the good one, and one of them's Gorgon Point. You'd go, well, obviously get Panther Lake. It's like way better. Yes, but what if the Panther Lake system has 16 gigs of RAM and the AMD one has 32? It doesn't matter how strong Panther Lake is. You're not going to get by like only giving 4 gigabytes of RAM for VRAM and 12 for system. Like that's just not going to cut it. And so this is something to watch with Panther Lake because you could see a situation. I mean, what did I just tell you about Nvidia as part of that lake? I said that Nvidia ran out of capacity at TSMC, and because of that, they're diverting supply from gamers to AI. And it's just like, right, and that's all 4 nanometer, you know, what if what if AMD has plenty of 4 nanometer capacity, and even though it's way worse than Panther, like they're actually able to make enough? I don't know. We'll have to see. Granted, Intel uses their own node for part of it, but not for all of it. They don't use their own node for all of Panther Lake. So that'll be something that we're going to definitely have to watch here. But so far, again, all I can say about Panther Lake is it's really good. You know, it successfully is a Strix Halo competitor, and for most users is probably a better choice than Strix Halo, I would argue. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say most users. It's up for debate, but at the same time, if that costs that much and the budget Panther like options are going to be even more than $1,000 with no E cores, just 4P and 4E, low power E, and then no hyper threading and 4xe, I just don't think that's going to do well against the AMD or AMD plus Nvidia offerings there. So we'll have to see though. But so far, it is concerning what we're seeing with Panther Lake pricing. And like I just reported behind the scenes, if anything, I'm hearing the pricing might continue to go up, or at least the cheaper models aren't going to be as cheap as you are being told they might be by some outlets. All right. Now, I also want to get to a PlayStation leak and then also a big old report on what's going on with RAM and silver prices actually behind the scenes. But first, I have to get to an ad from Micro Center. That's right. Once again, this live stream is sponsored by Micro Center. And something that I want to highlight about them, there's a few things. You know, there's the standard stuff. Like right now, they're opening up a new store in Austin, Texas. And you know, you can get a free 128 gigabyte flash drive if you go there. They also have their news center where you can get updates on the latest news. Please, right now, click the links below to Micro Center. Even just clicking on the links, even if you don't get something, that really does help the channel a lot. But in addition to that, actually, they do have some pretty good prices. Like I guess let me check now. This screenshot, I believe, was taken a couple of days ago. Let's make sure I'm not showing anything terrible here. It's funny. If I type in Micro Center to Google, the first thing that pops up is when is Micro Center coming to Nashville? It's ridiculous. We don't have one here. Let me tell you guys. But if you have one near you, if you are lucky enough to have one near you, let's see. RX 9070 XT. Okay, no, this picture is still fine. You can still get them for $700 at Micro Center, and I would recommend getting that now if you want a GPU at all this year. If you want a new one, I should say, this year, and you don't already have one you're happy with. But that's not all they're doing. In addition to that, they also have the new 9850X3D, and importantly, they have RAM bundles. You know, they have a 9850X3D, Asus 870 Prime, and then 32 gigabytes of RAM for $700. Guys, this is a $500 CPU that comes with at least a $100 motherboard, if not more. And then you're getting 32 gigabytes of RAM for free when this kit is usually like what now, $300 or something. That's why I recommend Micro Center, and that's why I'm happy they're sponsoring this piece of content. They also have budget options, again, basically for the price of the CPU, a little more. You're getting the motherboard and RAM. And so I don't know really what else there is to say about Micro Center. I mean, if you want a graphics card for a reasonable price, that's where you're going to go. And if you want to get a new motherboard and CPU, the fastest gaming CPU on the market, the 9850X3D, you can get it without being pulled over the coals for RAM prices. You can actually get it for a reasonable price still if you go to Micro Center. So please check out Micro Center and support more Slot by doing so today. All right, let us move on to the other the rest of the hallway of horrors that is the leaks I have for you this week. I don't like to have bad news, people, but you know, what can you do? It's not a lot of good news this week. And actually, let me put down a timestamp for this one as well. All right. Here's what I'm going to say. This is kind of just random stuff sources have said to me venting. A lot of sources, unsurprising probably to you all watching, are doing a lot of venting this week as they are not happy with what's going on. I want to be clear about that. The people in retail are not happy with RAM prices. They're not. It's like even the ones that would be making a little extra money off of each kit they would be doing it to offset the fact that people are just buying less stuff from them in general. Nobody likes this. Nobody likes the high RAM prices. I mean, and not everyone's marking it up. Like Micro Center is basically giving it to you for free. But okay. So first of all, and you believe it or not, this is some of the better news I've heard. I'm just I'm almost saying it as a joke, but apparently the RTX 5090's price on the street could soon drop to 3,000 to 3,300. Yay! Because right now, what's like $4,000 or $5,000. I was given some information that was basically what AIBs are having to pay for the bomb kits for the 5090 right now. It's going down in price a little soon. So I guess if $5,000 was too much for you, but $3,000 sounds great, I guess I have that good news for the 5090. I still would not pay that much unless it was for work and I needed it. But okay, moving on. Multiple sources complained about the price of silver. This is going to drive up the cost of just about every component right now. Seriously, multiple sources brought this up independently. I didn't even ask them about it unprompted. They told me silver prices are going to raise things right now as well. Also, it's getting so bad that multiple contacts think that smaller companies could go out of business, like some of the smaller boutique RAM companies, some of the smaller pre-builts. I mean, I was told horror stories. I don't want to throw any companies under the bus here, so I won't say which company was being talked about here, but I do know that some pre-builts are starting to get, well, let's say creative with how they price their systems. I'm sorry, with how they build their desktops. By that I mean some customers coming into PC repair shops are complaining about getting no-name graphics cards. Like, I don't know if this is a real name, but you go on AliExpress where you can find weird brands for graphics cards, and you'll see something that's called something like Delta Wolf. I don't know if that exists. Sounds like it could exist as some odd Chinese GPU AIB, but those are starting to show up in some of the bigger pre-built companies, the desktops they're shipping. So watch out for that. If you go to a pre-built company, like how do they manage to keep prices low? It's like, well, some of them are buying from weird sources now to try to keep prices lower, which I don't necessarily blame them or say that's bad, but I don't know. There's some of it. I'll call this timestamp RAM horror stories. How would we call it that? Um, Let me see here. I have multiple people saying that the best deals will probably be on APU systems that come with the memory soldered on. I've already told you about this in a recent leak, by the way. What does that mean? Lunar Lake. Lunar Lake systems will probably be some of the better systems. And then I guess probably Gorgon Point systems that come with the RAM soldered on the board, so like the faster LPDDR5 or LPDDR5X memory, not the SODIMM variants that are actually quite a bit slower. Gorgon Point really does need the fastest memory to perform remotely as well as they show in charts. So I'd recommend getting those too for laptop or even a mini PC if you can, anyways. But that's another thing there. And then I guess I'll also put this part of the leak in here before I get to the PS5 stuff. So it was kind of explained to me what you guys should expect in 2027 for RAM. And the way it was put is a lot of the fabs that make the memory, like a lot of them at Samsung, for example, I was told we're running at like a loss or basically breaking even for a long time, for years. And that was to have a solid foot in the market and try to build up like economy of scale. Like they kept scaling up their fabs for memory, scaling and scaling, making very, very, very slim margins on memory, especially last year, because they knew eventually they would have tons of capacity for AI and everybody else. And eventually prices will probably go up because the market fluctuates. And once it does, at least they will have all of this capacity to make tons of profits. And they are. You look at Samsung's earnings. They're making gobs of money right now off of this stuff. And because they were actually making losses or operating, breaking even a lot of the time previously, don't expect the pricing to go back to 2025, unfortunately. So, in other words, what I've had described to me is that prices could get better before the end of the year. It's not saying that much because prices are so bad right now. It's absurd, especially for the high capacity kits. But, you know, they should start getting a bit better maybe late this year, like I've already reported, but don't expect them to go down to 2025 levels. And I think this is an important thing to tell you because it's don't let good be don't let excellent be the enemy of good. These are the sort of things I've warned before where I'm like, yeah, I know the 97, like, last year I said, yeah, I know the 9070 XT is like 700 well, when it launched, it was like $750 or something, right? Maybe a little more. And I was like, but if you need a graphics card right now, I'm telling you, Nvidia is not supplying anything. And so you'd be better to get a 9070 XT for 750 now than to wait for it to sell out because Nvidia is not supplying the market unless you're okay paying $1,500 for a 5080. That's been my advice recently as well, as the 9070 XT is not affected as much as Nvidia. I still hear it won't be affected as much, but Nvidia's pricing is like really bad, like so like don't see a $700 9070 XT, refuse to get it, and then cry later this year when it's $800. Don't let excellent be the enemy of good. I'm going to say the same with RAM next year. I don't think we're going back to 2025 RAM pricing. I think that was a fluke. That was honestly ridiculous how cheap it was. I mean, I got the 64 gigabyte kit I'm using right now for a hilariously low price, and that wasn't really sustainable. They weren't making much profit when they were selling RAM at that price. It was kind of a race to the bottom. And so I don't know. Let me see. I know I'm kind of scared to even look, but let me look at like what are current RAM prices now. Let's just go. Let's say you want the standard, a 32 gigabyte DDR5, DDR5 6000, like the standard most milk toast RAM kit you could want to get. I mean, honestly, at this point, I would kind of recommend just getting that Micro Center deal and then selling the CPU and keeping the RAM or something. Frankly, that's what I'd probably recommend you do. Um, but let's see here. So what do you yeah, you're paying like 250 to $300, and some of the kits go for much more than that. But it's a decent Corsair kit here for like 250 or something. All right, that's 16 gigabytes. Sorry, let me rephrase. No, you're not paying that much. Please don't hate me too much in the live chat. I misread. Newegg showed me a wrong capacity kit. No, yeah, you're paying 350 to 450 for this 32 gigabyte kit, and that's horrible. Okay, hear me out though. If at the end of this year that kit is like $200, I would just get it. I don't know what it's going to go to. I'm not making any promises right now. I'm just giving you the best advice I can in a bad situation. Let me do the usual. These are like land acknowledgments for PC tech people. Let me do the land acknowledgement of saying, I wish everything was cheaper and I wish everything was free and everyone would get everything. Okay, I've done the land acknowledgement. Maybe we continue here. Having said that, well, I do think $200 is still a lot more than you would have paid for 32 gigabytes last year. Right now, it's about $400. If you see that hit 200 late this year, I would just get it because I don't think it's going back down to where it used to be, like which was what, $90. I don't. From what they're telling me, you've got like I said, the factor of they weren't really profiting before, and they were kind of waiting for this to happen so they could milk it a bit. That's happening, and they're not going to want to go back to not making any money. On top of that, you have silver prices going up, gold prices, just precious metals in general going up. That's going to make everything a little more expensive to manufacture, including RAM. And then you also have just basic inflation. Like once this sets in at a certain price, it will come back down. But to expect it to go back down to 2025 levels while silver prices are up and stuff, I don't think that's going to happen. So again, I did the land acknowledgement. Don't kill the messenger. I wish it was even cheaper than what I think it will be. But just that's really the best advice that I can give you here about RAM. So, all right, let me add another timestamp and then get to the one other thing that was in the title. Please like, by the way, there's over 1,000 people watching right now. Can we please get over 1,000 likes? Please give me a like. I'm just openly asking. Please give me a like. Let me see here. Let us continue the horrors of today. And that has to do with the PS5. And I almost didn't run this leak because I was cautioned by a couple of sources that we're not ready to say anything definitive yet. But I've started to get the nudges from some people, and I think I'll know a lot more and then like a week from now, maybe I can make a more firm recommendation or prediction. I should say more firm and concrete prediction, really, like exact times and what might happen. But I'm starting to hear people worry about PS5 supply. Now, I know Sony just openly said that they don't have any issues till 2027. And I don't think they're lying. I'm just saying that this has gotten so bad that behind the scenes, there's the confidence I heard at Sony, people who know people at Sony before, is not there. Publicly, yeah, they're like, "We got plenty of RAM and we'll be fine," and I don't think I think they do probably have plenty of RAM for at least the summer and probably till the end of this year, but they're starting to worry about how much RAM they will have, like, say, right at the holiday season or the beginning of next year. That's what I'm hearing behind the scenes. No, I'm not reporting that tomorrow you won't be able to buy a PS5. That's not what I'm saying. Don't send me links on Twitter that's like, I can still buy one in April or something or March. Well, yeah, March or April or June or even July, whatever. I'm not saying it's going to go out of stock. Uh, I'm not saying it's going to go out of stock tomorrow or something. What I am saying is there's starting to be some worry that they don't have enough to last for production to be affected at some point by the end of the year. And I'm starting to get some rumblings behind the scenes that some regions are having some issues getting a certain amount of dev kits. So maybe Sony's like rationing, when you can get certain things. By the way, for the record, I'm still told about some developers can't get Switch 2 dev kits, which makes no sense to me, but that's a different rant for another time. So that's all I'm saying is if you do want a PS5 or a PS5 Pro this year, I wouldn't wait. I made that list in my OpenAI, buying up all the RAM leak. Um, which, maybe let's see here. Moore's Law is dead. Maybe we go to this 132,000 reads. Most successful article on the website yet. So let's do this too. Let's go through and like audit the advice I gave you. Let's take a look back here. So let's see. Auditing RAM advice. And trust me, it's going to get funny when we talk about the AMD and Nvidia stuff because that has changed a little bit, hasn't it, since I put out that leak? When did I put that out? Wow, almost 2 months ago now. It's already been almost 2 months. I can't believe it. But let me here. Okay. So here we go. Let's scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Again, if you haven't this yet, I really do recommend you go check it out. It really breaks down why these shortages happen. But all right, I did the usual YouTuber S tier to E tier system of what's the most screwed. S tier, RAM itself, definitely true. A tier, SSDs, small pre-built PC companies, Radeon GPUs, and Xbox. This is true. Xbox has had issues. If you can buy one, it's just no one wants them. Radeon had prices go up before Nvidia. They did. Go look at articles from late 2025. AMD actually had their graphics card prices go up while Nvidia prices kept falling at first. And then B tier was Nvidia. Now, this is where things get funny because that was correct that Nvidia would be affected after AMD. But back then, I didn't know they would basically pause production on graphics cards. So I was right, but I didn't know they would do that. And once you do that, now actually Nvidia, maybe I should update this, is now all the way up in A tier at least. And AMD is probably maybe B tier because at least they're not cutting production. They're just, it's harder to get some of their models and they've gone up in price. But I still believe AMD is a bit better than Nvidia by now. Laptops and phones, look at Panther like pricing. That's definitely true, isn't it? And then D tier was PlayStation. So yeah, I mean, the E tier here, anything without RAM is becoming an issue because of silver. But I would say this list is actually still pretty accurate. I would just put Nvidia up here now. Um, and I would consider I would just warn that PlayStation will be in C tier soon. So that's the update. I thought it would be useful to go through all of that with you guys. Again, I'm not reporting today that you won't be able to get a PlayStation next month. Sony's already said publicly that they have enough RAM till 2027. But here's the thing. If you can't get an Nvidia graphics card for a reasonable price most of the time, unless it has 8 GB and it's crap, if you can't, if Nintendo Switch 2s start to become hard to get, Nintendo said they're worried as well. If Xbox, they're selling them basically for scalper prices just for MSRP now. And then AMD graphics cards start drifting up in price. Well, that basically just leaves PlayStation as the only good option if you care about price performance, at least compared to what we're used to with pricing a year ago, And so I would just think that's also going to drive up some demand there, especially when GTA 6 launches, if it ever launches, that is. And actually, that's probably, I'm just now realizing that's probably another reason Sony's starting to worry about RAM a little bit behind the scenes is that they know GTA 6 is coming out late this year. almost no one's going to buy it for Xbox at this point, and they have the best priced gaming device on the market. So yeah, they might just run through that RAM faster than they expected. But I don't know. Again, I just thought that's why I called this a warning in the title. I didn't call PlayStation pauses production leak or anything crazy or strongly worded about that. It's just a warning that based on conversations I've had with people about what's going on in the markets this week, one of the things that emerged is some people are starting to be a little concerned that it might be hard to get a PlayStation in like half a year to a year. And so if you do want one, you probably, like I said, and you maybe we're bumping that up to the C tier now from the D tier. But I know a lot of people care about PlayStation, so that should definitely be reported, and so I have. Okay, so that is everything in the leaks category. Wow, quite a few leaks this day. Let me now start getting through some of the questions. I saw there were some tipped ones. Let me see. Yeah, so let's go to the next gen console stuff now since I'm already talking about PlayStation. How about it? Let me put down a time stamp here. Call this PS6 and Steam Machine. R1 NG Master J5 says, somewhat old, yet your estimate for 4 to 5 gigahertz for the Canis CPU was that docked or handheld, also without detachable controls. Would a dock even be packed in? That's good questions. So here's what I will say. Let me first of all just pull up my PlayStation leak, right? Because I don't want to quote something and then just like misremember. Like let's always you always want to set the record straight and go, okay, well, you're saying I said something. Let's be very clear about what I said and not guess. All right, here it is. This is a leak I put out a bit ago. Can I? Yep. So let's go through. Right. So if I look at this leak, I'm remembering correctly, right? And when I put colored text, that means I'm more sure of it. White is usually like supplemental info, estimates, stuff that a dozen sources didn't confirm or something. But look, I said the die size, I said 6 Zen 6 cores, 192-bit bus, plenty of memory bandwidth for this APU, let me tell you, because it only has 16 compute units, although it is RDNA 5. And so I do think this is going to blow the current handhelds out of the water. Besides the Strix Halo handheld, although it might ray trace better, honestly, than the GPD Win 5. And if it's about the same performance or weaker, just keep in mind that's going to be something that's probably using more like 5 to 15 watts instead of like 30 watts with the GPD Win 5, or up to 120 watts. You can do full power with that thing, can't you? Backwards compatibility, a manufacturing plan for mid 2027, likely fall. Again, that's what the manufacturing's plan, people arguing about release dates. Yeah, I was told directly that 20% of that they got 20% CPU boost by using low power cores for background tasks, blah, blah, blah. I don't see anything here, unless I'm crazy, that says the speed of the CPU, meaning that R1 NG Master, thank you for the tip, but I haven't said how fast I think the CPU will be for sure. If you're quoting me guessing, that's what it is. I think I would probably base that guess off of what I've seen behind the scenes with like Venice benchmarks, right? Like I've seen them hitting, I believe, over 4 gigahertz. And so I'm like, well, if Zen 6C can hit above 4 gigahertz or maybe even 5 with like this server chips, why couldn't this hit 4 to 5 gigahertz? But keep in mind, this is 3 nanometer. Venice is built on 2 nanometer, and it's a guess. I'm guessing that maybe this could be 4 to 5 gigahertz, but I don't know for sure. For all I know, the handheld's 3.5 gigahertz and the home console's 4 or 4.5 gigahertz. I'd personally be surprised if the home console wasn't above 4 gigahertz, but I honestly think that's no, because remember, Sony's building the PS6. It's not a hybrid console like Xbox Magnus. It's built to run a 4K 120 hertz OLED TV in your living room, and they almost can do 120 pretty well with ancient Zen 2. So I'm pretty sure, with their whatever I reported, with their like 8 Zen 6C cores, that will have, what is that? I mean, what are we talking about in an IPC increase here? Because remember, the C cores have the same IPC as the non-C from Zen 2. Let's say, let's just do performance per core in gaming. let's see, 1.2 or something, basically times 1 point, I don't know, 1 with Zen 4 kinda times 1.05 just to be charitable to Zen 5. I know it's not usually that. And then let's just do 1 point. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a 50% to almost doubling of IPC, depending on how this thing turns out, probably closer to the 60% mark. But if they can already basically do, with what is it with the PS5 Pro? It's like 3.5, 3.8 gigahertz with some boost mode or something with Zen 2. I think 4 gigahertz Zen 6C is probably enough to lock 120 hertz anyway. So we'll see what they do. But yeah, my estimate would be it's probably 4 to 5 gigahertz, but I'm not sure of that. It is 3 nanometer. It is C cores. I could see it being limited to 4 or 3 or 4, 3.8 or something. But that's why I haven't said the exact clock speed, because I did see a document that said the clock speed of the iGPU in the handheld. I did not see any document call out the clock speed of the CPU. And frankly, that's because AMD doesn't know what it's going to be yet. They're pretty sure what RDNA 5 will be able to achieve by now. Well, they probably are pretty sure about Zen 6 behind the scenes now, but at least as of when I got this information, they weren't, if that makes sense. All right, let's stop sharing that screen. Da-da-da. All right, what else do we have here? I know there's other tipped questions. Da-da-da. Let me see. Basement Jack 2 says, thank you. I appreciate your videos. Well, thank you for watching. Let's continue rolling. Let's see. Well, I answered the Zen 6 question now because it's related to what I just said. So Devious DJ Aftershock. I believe you were just DJ Aftershock before. Now you're Devious, apparently. Tips, thank you for the tip, and says, given Zen 6 target clocks, has there been talks about Zen 7's frequency, or is it too early? Oh, it's too early. I haven't seen anything about Zen 7's clock speeds, except if I remember correctly, they think it'll be the same or higher, but even that is just, I think I remember that. But no, I wouldn't say any specific thing for Zen 7. Says Zen 6 is already a huge jump gigahertz wise. It is, at least if they can get N2X out on it. I'm a little worried they'll just move to N2P to combat Nova Lake and abandon N2X. And if they did, I would more so expect it to be like 6 to 6.5 gigahertz instead of 7. But let's hope that doesn't happen. All right. Let me continue the questions about consoles here, because there's some Steam Machine stuff as well. So Bespoke exclamation point writes in and says, how many accurate leaks do you think you need to put out before people start taking you seriously? Well, first of all, they do. I mean, I think this is worth reporting. I mean, remembering, not reporting, worth remembering that my stuff gets reported by mainstream news oftentimes now. Like it does. And just because a couple of rumor rag websites that get about as many clicks a month as I get in like some videos, it does not mean that a lot of people don't take me seriously. Now, would you argue, do enough people take me seriously? I don't know, man. I'm not going to get into an argument about that. Obviously, how could I argue that? I'm biased towards myself, so whatever. But he continues here. Sony CFO just confirmed that Sony has enough RAM stockpile to last at least until 2027 and is in constant negotiations to meet demand. If only someone had leaked this. Yeah, I know. So I am right, though, that Sony is the least affected. Again, though, update today. Watch out a little bit. I still wouldn't wait to get that PS5 if you want to get one or something. I want to be waiting for the GTA 6 sale. Also, God knows if GTA 6 is even coming out this year. Oh, and I just got more feedback about the PS5 thing as well from a source. Yeah, okay. So I can't say where the information came from, but I can say that I got further updates that make me confident Sony's becoming a little concerned. And it would have to do with negotiations, I guess I will say, right? Like it says Sony has enough until 2027 and there's constant negotiations. I guess what I can say is basically what I'm hearing now, reading between the lines of the new info I was just sent, that Sony is worried what they'll have to pay to make the negotiations go well. That's what I'll say. All right. Archer writes in, let me just put down a new timestamp at this point, right? And says, given the recent update from Valve on Steam hardware and based on their wording, what do you think they're planning to do with their strategy? So I'll be honest with you, I didn't see this until today. And so I am learning about this when you guys are. But I did have some fans send the link to me. So I will just read it with you and then give you my live opinion. So here we go. Da-da-da. Let's see here. Boom. Share. All right. Here it is. And then zoom out possibly too, so it lines up for you guys a little bit. Da-da-da. Can I? It's just gonna. That's good. All right. So Steam hardware launch timing and other FAQs. Yeah, I did not see that this came out tomorrow yesterday. So let's see. We're starting the Steam hardware blog as a way to specifically address topics. Yep, yep, yep. Before we dive into some of the hardware specific questions, we'll get straight to the two things. Yes, I would agree. That's what everyone wants to know is when is it launching, how much will it cost? And they said, and I agree with what they're, yeah, this is my understanding as well. This is basically what I said. They're like, we plan on being able to share specific pricing and launch dates by now. Right? I thought they would, and I thought they were probably planning until they saw a bad memory god. But yep, they say, but the memory and storage shortages you've likely heard about across the energy have rapidly increased. Since then, the limited availability and growing prices of these critical components means we must revisit our exact shipping schedule and pricing. Right? Our goal of shipping all three products in the first half of the year has not changed, but we have to work we have work to do to land on concrete pricing and launch dates that we can confidently announce. Being mindful of how quickly the circumstances around both of these things can change, we'll continue to give you an update as blah 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 blah. In the meantime, we plan to use this blog to deliver additional content deep dives. Right. So is there anything else here? Play newer, more demanding games. Yes, I did see this too. This is interesting. Optimizing ray tracing performance in the driver. Hopefully, they pass that along to AMD so their RDNA 3 and 3.5 products get more support. Don't know why Sony and Valve have to make AMD give you good ray tracing and FSR to older architectures, but I guess that's just how AMD fucking operates now with their blunderland. Sorry, I'm still pretty mad that since I reported that AMD paused FSR4 and RDNA 3 development, and now we're seeing Valve basically saying they are going to try to bring better versions of this. AMD, you should be doing it on your own, and it's pathetic that I'll say this. I'm actually possibly going to do a rant video eventually. Like, I do think like PS5 Pro is going to maybe get FSR4 before desktop graphics cards with RDNA 3 and 3.5. Well, those would be APUs if it's 3.5, and that's just pathetic. AMD. Sony should not be beating you to supporting FSR4 on older architectures. Anyways, though. Yeah, so what? Here we go. What will third party be able to make faceplates? CAD? Yes, you plan to share those. What components of Steam Machine are upgradable? Are both accessible and upgradable? Oh, look who was right, by the way. Hey, you nerds that attacked me for that cut down yield, where I emphasized that they might have to rely on you bringing your own RAM and SSD. There it is, buddies. They're thinking about that, aren't they? And like I said back in that cut down yield, let me actually pull that up as well, just to jog everybody's. Oh no, I already backed that up to a hard drive. No, I didn't. There it is. It was recent enough. I did change the thumbnail though eventually to more accurately reflect what I thought it would be. Let me this and then share here. For those who missed it, it was this video where I talked about the fact that I thought AMD, or well, AMD through proxy, but that I thought that Valve needed to have a bare bones option potentially. And I even said, hey, if Valve, like there were people that are like, it looks hard to access it and upgrade it. It's like, well, if it's hard, then they need to delay the console so that you can do that. Because, and I just don't think people got it. And I still don't think a lot of people do. The problem with RAM right now is not just the pricing, it's getting it at all. Like, I think like Sony's concern with PS5 supply of RAM that I was just talking about, their big concern is the price, yes, but if they can even secure enough to make 20 million consoles in a year or whatever they need in general, like the issue isn't just that RAM prices have gone up. The bigger issue is that OpenAI bought all the RAM. Regardless of price, it's just hard to get no matter what you want to pay for it. And I said in this CDY, which a lot of you got mad at me for, that if you think this is a bad idea, you don't get how bad the shortage is going to be. Now, maybe some of you are realizing how bad it is. If you look at Valve's recent statement, what the hell did they say? It will be easily upgraded. And what does that mean to me? Potentially, They looked at the design and they said, we might want to change it a little bit so people can upgrade it easily because, well, it's the RAM apocalypse. So, yeah, that's one of my takeaways as well, is that when they can't announce the release date or pricing yet, they're probably deciding if they should do a bare bones version and probably putting maybe a little effort into, like, is there one design tweak, like one notch we can add, one door, like can we add a hinge in one spot and remove one part of the heat sink so it's easier to access the components. I think that's probably what they're looking at right now, is what are the tiny things we can do with the Steam machine so that you can upgrade the RAM and SSD yourself, because that's going to be essential in this market. Um, but outside of that, I mean, what do I read into this? I mean, I would suggest that they probably have some stockpiles of RAM and SSDs for the Steam machine already. It'd be hard for me to believe they don't. That would have been wild to announce a product before you have your ducks in a row. Like, I think, like, I'm just thinking of previous launches. Like, I know before Alchemist launched, I'm not bringing this up because it's the best example. It's just one that I actually know about. Like, for the A770 launch, Intel bought the RAM for it like half a year or a year before it came out. And I know that Sony usually stockpiles RAM at least 6 months before a console launch or things are fully being manufactured. They usually don't buy these 1 month before. Valve's a smaller company. They haven't launched as many consoles, as Sony has. So maybe they made this mistake, but I'd find it hard to believe they hadn't already stockpiled some memory and SSDs for the Steam machine before they announced it in November. Some. But that still leaves a problem, right? Right now, what they're probably deciding is, should we decide it should be 400, 500, 600, or 800? Because, well, we have enough RAM and SSDs stockpiled to do the initial launch of, I don't know how many, 500,000, a million consoles, whatever they're going to have. What they're probably concerned about is what the next shipment will cost or when they can get it. And they're probably thinking about momentum. You know what I mean? Like, they're probably, if I'm at Valve right now, what I'm thinking about is, again, let's say hypothetically, I have enough supply to launch 500,000 consoles right away. We could do it in a month if we wanted to. Well, you're then doing though is going, but when's the next shipment? Right? Are we not going to get another shipment of RAM until quarter 4? Well, if that's the case, we might not want to launch this until like June, because if we launch it in June, we'll have enough supply for a couple months. And then when it sells out, maybe we can, like, so that'd be June, so July. Yeah. So like maybe in September, it'll only be sold out for like a month or something. And then like October, November, December, the last quarter, maybe we can surge products in October and be better for us to launch in June, have enough supply until like 1 or 2 months of nothing than it would be to launch in like now and then have no supply for half a year and people forget about it. It loses momentum. That's my reading of what Valve's doing right now. That's the decision I believe Valve is making with the Steam machine, is they're saying, well, based on these recent statements, I mean, based on what we can see, it's going to be longer until we get the next thing. And we got to make sure we know what that's going to cost. And so, like, maybe we could launch right now at $500, but that's with this supply. If the RAM costs twice as much in the future, are we going to want to raise the price, or should we just make it 600 or 700 now? And that's like the average price. And we can always drop prices in a year or something if it comes back down. Like, I think that's the decision they're making. And they're also having to take into account the market they're in. I mean, what if they think the PS5 could go up in price? That's really important information to them. What if the Series X already costs ridiculous amounts of money? What if Sony starts to run through their RAM and then they raise the price? And, like, I'm not saying they will. This is all the type of stuff these companies are thinking about, though. Like, what if Sony raised the price of the Pro to like $850 more than the 2 TB Series X? Probably fair, even if I don't wish any of these cost that much. And then they took the base model and made it like 650 or 600 with a disk drive. Then if you're a Valve, you're like, oh, well, Sony just upped the price. We can now get away with making the Steam machine 600 more easily now, or with 2 TB 700. And then also in the meantime, they're probably like, ooh, well, if we're going to have to charge more for this, we should probably make sure the variable refresh rate stuff, the 120 hertz support, the ray tracing, the FSR support, that's all as good as it can be right away. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if what Valve is doing right now, and I don't know how, I haven't thought about this yet, but I bet they try to do something like this, right? let me write this down here as a new timestamp actually, because I actually think this is pretty big. Um, what was I gonna FSR 4 on Steam Machine? Like, if you're Valve, let's be honest, AMD's being stupid with FSR support, and they're probably going, well, we do know that you can make FSR 4 run right on RDNA 3, which their graphics card that they're using. It's basically just a 7600M that's underclocked, or it's not overclocked, whatever. It's basically a 7600M. They're probably looking at that and going, well, if AMD is not going to bring official support for FSR 4, we know you can already hack it to work on there pretty easily. Why don't we go into the Steam settings and add we'll just do it ourselves. We've already had hackers who made FSR 4 work on RDNA 3. Certainly, we could task a dozen people at Valve for a month or a week to just take that same package and like make some official injection system through Steam or something for RDNA 3 owners. And then we'll also have that be in the Steam machine. And they're probably thinking we're going to need to do that, because if we're going to end up charging $700-800 for this device instead of our initially planned, whatever it was, $500, we should offer something you can't get elsewhere. We should say, hey, look, I know it's this much, but look, it costs the same or a little more than a base PS5, but guess what? It has FSR 4 support, so it actually ends up looking better than a base PS5 now. And that's plausible, people. I want to be clear. That is plausible. That what we could see with the Steam machine is a device that I think I estimated was 10-20% weaker than the PS5. Well, if it gets FSR 4 support, actual image quality at the same frame rate might now match the PS5 or exceed it a little. And if that happens, well, that's really probably necessary now if they have to charge more for it than they initially wanted. So when you see these like almost sounds like delays, unwilling to say what they would charge for the Steam machine, my reading is that type of stuff is going on in the background. They're trying to confirm how much will the next shipment of RAM cost. We should probably average what we charge for this console based on the initial, but then later shipments. Like maybe we sell it at cost later at a profit at first, but we have to charge more because we know the prices on the components are going up. And then at the same time, they're going, we should probably have some official Valve FSR on RDNA 3 thing, so that if we have to charge more than the PS5, maybe a lot more, we can at least argue it's better. We can make this look like a more premium device. The Series X ain't getting FSR 4. It's got RDNA 2. We can take this and make it look maybe closer to a PS5 Pro. It won't be as strong as the PS5 Pro, for the record, especially because the PS5 Pro will get PSSR 2 and possibly just official FSR 4 support as well. But, they could make it feel like it's in between the PS5 and PS5 Pro. So, yeah, I think that's my reading of it. And I hope that makes sense to all of you. I've seen a bunch of people going, "Oh, they're going to delay it, cancel it, whatever." I find it unlikely they cancel this device. They just want to know when they'll get what supply, and they don't want to have a release date until they bridge that gap so that it doesn't sell out and you can't get it for like 6 months. Because imagine if the PS5 came out and then you couldn't buy it for half a year. I know what everyone's saying. You couldn't. Well, you could. It was just usually from scalpers for $800. Like, it wasn't that Sony wasn't making them. What if they literally can't make this for a certain amount of time unless they delay the launch to keep the momentum going? So that's the decisions they're making. That and the FSR support, I believe, and also possibly tweaking the design. That was the third thing. Possibly tweaking the design so that it's easier to upgrade the RAM and SSD, because that's going to be essential for this device to be viable at all. Like, they're probably making the decision, a bare bones model, a 16 gigabyte model, but with the understanding of no, 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 it only is 16 gigabytes for now. Because RAM's so expensive, long term, you'll be able to upgrade it. Don't worry. We even made it easier to upgrade. So I'm rambling a bit, but again, number one, they want to bridge that gap so that there's not 6 months where they can't make it. Number two, they probably want to make sure there's some form of FSR 4 support on it so they can justify a higher price. Number three, they're probably adjusting the design so it's easier to upgrade the internal components. That's what I believe is going on with Steam Machine. That is my takeaway after reading their statement from this week. Okay. Let me see. What else do we have here from you all? Let me put that here. Might make that a cut down yield, actually. I think that was pretty good. All right, let's see what we have. No News writes in and says Valve says they still plan to ship their new hardware by June 30th. What is more important or influential in the industry, the Steam machine or the release of a do-it-yourself Steam OS? Hmm. New current conditions blunts Valve's influence. Yeah, it could. So, what's more important? A do-it-yourself, anyone can install it, Steam OS to compete with Windows, and at least in gaming, or the Steam machine itself? I don't think you can really answer that until you see the Steam machine and the Steam OS launch. Like, will the Steam OS for do it yourself launch and then it only works on AMD APUs or and some AMD GPUs and it doesn't support Nvidia and then some people use it if they have AMD but it's mostly niche. Well, no, I don't know if that would be as big of a deal as the Steam machine. Also with the Steam machine, what if it comes out and it doesn't work as well as we thought it would, or you can't buy it, or they're forced to charge $1,000 for it? No, no, I don't know. But what I would suggest is I could see either one being more influential. Like, let's say they do manage to sell the Steam machine, and it even comes with RAM and an SSD for $500, and it has FSR4 support, and it actually performs a little better than the PS5, and they're actually able to make a ton of them. I think that would be more influential. Well, conversely, what if over here with the Steam OS, what if Steam OS launches for do it yourself and it works fantastically on Nvidia, on Intel, on AMD. And in fact, if you have an AMD graphics card, you can force FSR4. Maybe they'll even add a plugin for the Steam OS once they hopefully get FSR4 working for their stuff. What if they let it force work on Nvidia hardware? What if you have what would be the example? I don't know if it would be Turing. Oh, maybe though, right? Like, what if an Nvidia 2080 owner installs Steam OS? This is a very niche example, but and what they then do is they force FSR4 on Turing because Nvidia's new DLSS runs like crap on their old architecture. I don't know. That might make SteamOS the gold standard of gaming operating systems. But until I know how they both turn out, I can't tell you which one's more influential. I would just say they both could have a very large impact on this market, in my opinion. Clean Sweep writes in and says, I've started seeing the we shouldn't be moving to next gen consoles take grow lately. Yeah, I know you always see it. How much of this is a result of the rough economic times for a lot of people, and how much could be due to long game dev cycle damaging the value proposition of a consoles? I mean, a lot of it I think is just Groundhog's Day. Every generation you see. When I leaked the PS5 Pro, um, would come out, what did I say, 23 or 24, and it ended up launching in 2024. Well, that leak I think I put out in like 2021 or something. People were like, "What? This is way too soon." And it's like, "Well, yeah, but this is 3 years before it comes out. You won't be saying that when it comes out." And lo and behold, they didn't. It sold well. I think at least in line sales, it's doing about as well as the PS4 Pro did. So I don't know. There's always people that complain that it's too soon, and it's because they don't get that I didn't say, or the leaks didn't say that it's coming out tomorrow. It's coming out years from now still. To this, right? If we're being honest about the PS5, the PS6, and the Xbox Magnus, it's still basically 2 years away. Like, even if they both launch in 27, it's still probably more than a year and a half away. And so when you hear about it, it's like, yeah, well, we'll see what happens. What if the RAM shortages improve by the end of next year? It has awesome performance. It's a reasonable price, and you'll realize that your PS5 is 7 years old. I don't think those people will still be complaining as much as they are now. Um, as for the economic conditions thing, yeah, look, that's a thing. There's a two-tier economy right now where the rich people buy 5090s and the poor people are mad that the 5060 only has 8 GB of RAM for, well, was it even 300 anymore? It's like $400 or $500 now. Yeah, it sucks. I think that's a part of it. It is. It is a part of it. That a lot of the people that would buy a console, the people that just want a no nonsense system and don't want to spend a ton of money, those are the people that are probably also on harder times right now compared to richer people. So that's probably affecting it as well. But that's everything right now, man. That's not just consoles. Falto writes in, there was a Switch 2 third-party direct, and I must say, well, the games they showed didn't interest me as I play them on PC. I am still pretty impressed with what they showed off with the Switch 2 in terms of performance. Like, it looked like it ran Indiana Jones pretty well. So this tells me, in my opinion, that the Switch 2 might actually be able to run games well into the PS6 gen, as we expect many early titles to be cross-gen. On top of that, if they release a handheld, which is said to be weaker than the PS6 from raw performance, I can see it running the games like 720p to 1080p. What do you think? Is the Switch 2 powerful enough to last a good 6 to 7 years? All right. I'll put down a timestamp for this one. I do like this question a lot. Switch to How long will it last? It lasts. Okay. So, as always, a thing I almost always do when I get a question like this is, well, what do you mean? Right? What do you mean by how long will it last? Because if you ask my girlfriend, who primarily games on Switch and has a Switch too, she would say the Switch did not last until last year, that she stopped playing the newest Zelda because even for her, someone who really doesn't care if the game's at 120 hertz, she's fine with 60. She thinks 75 frames with like a frame rate cap on a variable refresh rate monitor at 75 frames a second. She thinks that's plenty smooth. Even she thought the Switch was becoming too slow to really use for any of the harder to run games. So if you were to ask her, and I think many of the people that bought the Switch 2 on day one, by the way, they would say the Switch did not last actually until 2024, that it stopped really being usable years before the Switch 2 came out. Well, but then if you ask Nintendo, they would say the Switch is still great and we have a Switch family and we're combining the sales numbers. It's the best selling console family of all time, blah, blah, blah. So it just depends what you mean by last. Like, will the Switch 2 last 6 to 7 years and still be getting Nintendo exclusives? Yes, I'd pretty much bet everything I own that will be true. There will be at least some Nintendo exclusives still releasing on the Switch 2 in 6 to 7 years. By the way, for those keeping track, 7 years from now will be 2033. I believe Zen 6, of course, is coming out this and next year. I think Zen 7 will probably come out in 2028 in some form. And then Zen 8, which, by the way, I've already leaked, is codenamed Penelope. The core is, at least. That's coming out in 2030. So let's be very clear about this. You are asking me, will games be releasing on the 8 nanometer Switch 2 around when Zen 9, what is it? What is, I'm blanking. Zen 9, it had a really cool name. Zen Nemesis. That's right. That's the code name of the core. Will will Nintendo still be releasing exclusives on the 8 nanometer Switch 2 when Zen 9 Nemesis launches? Probably. Now, will most AAA games be coming to it? No, I don't think so. Overall, when I think about the performance of the Switch 2, I think it's probably going to age a little better than the original Switch at first, but by the end of the generation, it might not feel that different. So overall, better, but you all know what I mean. Tell me in the live chat if you know what I mean by that. Like at first, better, late into the generation, not. Like, let's put it this way. What's a good comparison of a game that's coming out that's third party, AAA? Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is actually like a really good comparison to The Witcher 3 on the Switch because same studio. And I remember shrugging for both of them, because people are like, oh, can you believe the Switch can run The Witcher 3? And I'm like, this thing's years old, this game. Yeah, I would hope the new console can run like a 2-3-year-old game, and they had to like make it so there's like less flowers on screen and delete trees to make it work. Yes, I can believe that. I would hope it would run it at least that well if the game's that old. So when you compare that, how The Witcher 3 ran on the original Switch to how Cyberpunk 2077 runs, Cyberpunk runs way better, right? Doesn't it on the Switch 2 than Witcher? So comparatively, I think it's going to do better, at least short term. Additionally, it has 12 gigabytes of RAM. The Series S has 10 gigabytes of RAM. And I think devs are gonna like sacrifice goats to try to make their games run on the Series S for at least the next 3 years, and then they'll drop it like a bad habit. They'll just drop that thing. But that's still 3 years. And any game that you fit on the Series S is a game that you have 2 extra gigabytes of RAM for the Switch 2 because it has 12 instead of 10 on the Series S, and you have a stronger graphics card overall in image quality because of DLSS as well, usually on the Switch 2. And the CPU is just probably a little weaker than the Series S is. So anything they can fit on the Series S, that's like a 720p 60 game, which is really what the Series S is going to continue to become, is more and more a 720p console. That same thing on the Switch 2 will probably run 1080p 40, right? So that, yeah, they'll probably be able to get pretty much most AAA games, at least until a year or two into the next generation. By then, the Switch will be like 3-4 years old. You'll already be halfway through the gen. So halfway through next gen, look, it remains to be seen how much RAM Sony can afford to give their consoles. but I continue to believe that the handheld will probably get at least 24 gigabytes, and that the home console will get at least 30 gigabytes. You know, so halfway into next gen is when the games will start releasing that were purpose built for the PS6 and the PS6 handheld. Those games will probably rely on that RAM to like run ray tracing and AI features. That's when the Switch 2 becomes old. Like when you have the Switch 2 having half the RAM the PS6 handheld has, or less than half the RAM, and the games were built from the PS6 in mind, that's when you're going to start seeing half of AAA games not come to the Switch 2. But I still think half of them will. It's not until the very end of the generation where it's going to be a big issue. But overall, again, Switch 2 will age better than Switch 1. You can already see that with Cyberpunk versus The Witcher 3. Halfway through next gen. So you're talking 2030. Yeah, I mean, look, some AAA games will stop coming to the Switch 2. Most you'll still probably be able to run like 720p, 1080p, 30, probably. But by the end of the generation, it's not going to be able to run most games just like the original Switch because it won't have enough RAM. And it just look, it's the end of next gen. Again, when Zen 9 Nemesis is launching, the Switch 2 will be an 8 nanometer product. It'll be using a 13-year-old node by the end of the gen. Ugh, hate saying that out loud. Oh, if I put it that way, it sounds really crappy. Doesn't it be using a 13-year-old node or 14, 15-year-old node by the time it is retired? It is what it is. You know, it's Nintendo, but still better than the Switch 1. Just the bar wasn't that great there. Okay, so I got through most of the console questions. Let me do some of these tipped questions here. Put down a new time stamp. Daz M8 writes in, any news on upcoming updates to NVENC, AMD or AMD equivalent features? Sorry, I don't. Thank you for the tipped question. You gave me $5 Aussie dollars from what I can see there from down under. But unfortunately, no, I don't. That's not the type of thing I really ask my sources about. Like that sort of thing, like when you see an RDNA 5 leak and it's like, ooh, and it also does this encoding. That's just because I also noticed that was on a document. I'm interested in die size, power consumption, performance, raw, like the cost of it, big new features like a DLSS 5 or something. I'm not really asking about NVENC or anything like that usually. Doesn't mean I might not hear about it. It's not really the focus of the stuff I do. I'm Rand Sally writes in and says, is there any reason why AMD hasn't added 3D V-Cache to Strix Halo? I don't believe it has the connections for it. It seems like an easy way to add performance without increasing power draw. So let me put this here. STXHX3D. So let me be very clear about something. I've already put out my Zen 7 Grimlock leak. And actually before, let's see if I've said this publicly before I get to it, because I'm guessing I have. Let me see here. I'm looking at it. Yes, I think I did. Let me do Control F. 3D. Come on. V cache. Right. And so you have, yes, there it is. So let me share my screen here quickly. I'm just opening up the PowerPoint here. So, right. Here is the right. So here it is. There's two types of dies, right? And I'll be talking about this a lot more with extra detail soon. But so make sure you're subscribed to the channel because within a month, you're probably going to get some pretty big Ryzen updates from me. But I've already told you guys publicly that there's the almost 100 millimeter squared 16 core chiplet that's Silverton. That is the one that supports Vcache. That is the one where you can get up to 224 megabytes of L3 per CCD. Yes, that's 448 megabytes total. Before even talking about the IO dies cache. I know it's an insane amount of cache. That's what they're going to use for a lot of server, for high-end desktop. And then you go to the APUs. The APUs in budget desktop, I believe, will use 56 millimeter squared. Yes, very small. Silver King. Now, Silver King is 8 core chiplets, as you can see here, and there is no support for Vcache whatsoever. These are going to target efficiency, and this is what they will add to APUs. Grimlock Halo is my understanding comes with at least 20 cores before LP cores, so probably 22, 24 cores on the like monolithic, well, not monolithic, on the CPU portion of the die. And then if you want, you can add 8 core chiplets, 2 of them to then go up to like 28 cores or whatever. I don't know, so or 36 here. Sorry, I'm misreading here. Think about what that means. I'm telling you that Zen 7, the chiplets they will use on laptop to increase core counts, should you want to go to more cores than what's built into the IO chiplets, those ones don't support Vcache, meaning Grimlock Halo doesn't support Vcache, meaning I don't think they even have the connections to add Vcache to Strix Halo. Like, if they're not planning to do that with Zen 7, I doubt they're doing it with 6 and certainly 5. So when you ask me, and thank you for writing in, thank you for the tip, is there a reason they haven't added 3D Vcache to Strix Halo? They don't think it was worth it. And I do think it's worth mentioning that the chiplets Strix Halo uses are not the same chiplets that are used on desktop Zen 5. They're not. They are not the same thing. They're a custom version of Zen 5, kind of a Zen 5 Plus in a way, actually, built for slower clock speeds, like 5 gigahertz and less, pretty much, and less power draw, better efficiency. They don't like Vcache increases performance in some ways, but I don't think they think it's really worth it. I mean, I do think there's an obvious question, yeah, but wouldn't it help some? Doesn't it seem odd? And I'd go, I don't know, maybe, but from what I'm seeing, that just doesn't really seem to be the plan. I guess maybe Zen 6 could do it because I know they're going with just one 12 core that supports Vcache. So potentially Medusa Halo will have it, but Zen 7 isn't doing it for their Halos, I don't believe. And I don't believe Zen 5 has the connectors to do it either. So they just didn't think it was worth it. That's really the best answer I can give you. You'd have to ask an AMG engineer why they didn't think it was worth it. But again, I think it's important for me to tell you the stuff I just told you because I don't think it's a matter of AMD deciding if they want to do it. I think they can't unless they change that for Gorgon Halo. Who knows? But I don't know about that. So we got more console questions there. Let me get to some of these CPU questions since we were just talking about that. CPUs. So Florida Man writes in and he says, Panther Lake is genuinely innovative for its efficiency, but with the pricing as high as we expect, for gamers, wouldn't you still want a dedicated GPU? On a quick check, Lenovo is selling a 5060 laptop for $1060 right now. Are they really? Let me pull that up. Lenovo 5060 laptop. And then let me just go to shopping. You usually get very good deals just on Lenovo's website itself. Oh, yeah, there it is. No, go away. I don't want more details, Lenovo. I want you to not. Oh my God. There it is. Decline offer. Yeah, see, this is the type of thing I'm worrying about for Panther Lake. Let me share my screen again here. So, right. Here we are. Yeah, something like this is what worries me about Panther Lake. What does it have? What does it have? Okay, only 16 gigabytes of memory, only 512 gigabytes of storage. Right, but at least let's see here. Oh, up to 5060. Okay, so it's really a 5050 laptop. All right, so it's becoming debatable here already for me, but yeah, look, the 5050 is about on battery the same performance as Panther Lake is on battery. So you could argue GPUs equal. Argue. A lot of people would still rather have the 5050 if they do gaming plugged in at home, they don't have a desktop, but you could argue the graphics equal to a Panther Lake laptop, right? And then so right now, to get a Panther Lake laptop, you usually have to spend $1,500, and it's for the 4XE model that has the same amount of RAM and storage as this. And the CPU is, so what is that? Isn't that Kraken? Burp, 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 burp. Specifications, 8. There you go. It's Hawk Point. Okay. All right. Well, it's about the same as Kraken, though, for being honest. A little worse, actually, maybe in CPU in some ways for single threading. But yeah, when you see laptops like this, it is a real problem for Panther Lake. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm kinda done with dedicated graphics laptops. That's why I have a Strix Halo laptop. That's why Panther Lake would actually interest me right now if I was looking at it. I don't think I'd pay $3,000 for it, I'll tell you that much. But, I just think APUs are significantly more stable in my experience, easier. They tend to last longer. There's less components that go bad. If you needed to reapply thermal paste to them, it's only one component. You don't have 2 that you need to worry about. It's just better. I think APU laptops are just better and obviously wildly more efficient on average on battery. So there's that. But that's me. I have to say, if you're someone that was buying a laptop for college and you didn't have a desktop and you had to do the gaming you were going to do, yeah, I mean, I would get that like $1,000 Lenovo laptop over a Panther like system, unless I had all the money in the world. Like I probably would because your efficiency is a lot worse, but you're spending half as much as a Panther like laptop for the same GPU performance and probably CPU that's like, not as good, but still enough. It's a problem. I really think it's a problem for them, and it's going to be a bigger problem if AMD can like mass manufacture, which will remains to be seen if they can. The RAM issues are going to hit AMD as well, but it remains to be seen if AMD can effectively like sell, Gorgon AI, what is it, AI 9 470 12 cores with a 5070 for 1500. A lot of people would choose the AMD CPU, which is really in CPU performance just as good as Panther. Like technically, they can advertise a better NPU, although I don't know how much NPUs really matter. And then better graphics than Panther Lake for the same price. I mean, a lot of people will probably choose that, honestly. So it's an issue, but Panther Lake is a premium product. It is meant to be, in my opinion, compared to Strix Halo because that's what it costs, and you're paying for the extra efficiency and features just like you would for Strix Halo. You're not paying because it's going to be cost competitive with a Kraken plus 5050 laptop. It's just not going to be. Um, Jensen Wang, all shall be Nvidia, writes in and says, you've commented multiple times that Panther Lake costs the same as Strix Halo, but so far it seems to be more expensive. Is this just the function of newness, or do you think even the 395 plus might be cheaper than top Panther Lake chips? I mean, it could be. I've had people suggest to me that Strix Halo could be actually cheaper to manufacture than Panther Lake. Having said that, I don't know exact. That's why I just say they're comparable. I don't have the bomb sheet with me for all of these right now. I don't know. I can only estimate that it's probably similar. What I will say though is a lot of the Strix Halo laptops you're seeing were manufactured obviously last year with RAM that was soldered onto them. Think about what that means. Well, that means that they were priced before the RAM shortages. So a lot of the reason I think Panther Lake laptops are more than Strix Halo right now isn't just that Panther Lake costs the same in weight as gold, or though does it? Might probably does. But what no, it probably doesn't actually. But um what I'm saying is that the APU itself costs about the same to make, but yes, also the pricing is from RAM costs. It is. And look, Panther Lake has like what is it, a 7457 mega transfer requirement. Most of them come with LPDDR5X 9600. That's radically fast memory. That's way more expensive than RAM that you can put with Kraken. And I think you're going to see a lot of Kraken laptops this year because they don't need the faster memory for the bandwidth because they only have 8 compute units and 4 big cores and 4 little cores. And so a lot of them are going to go, well, if it's memory bandwidth bottlenecked anyways, because we have to use, DDR5 4800 or some crap, we might as well just use Kraken and throw an NVIDIA graphics card in there. I think you're going to see that a lot this year. But yeah, Panther Lake probably costs about the same to make as Strix Halo, but it is also launching in a year where the RAM costs more. And that is, of course, making it worse, to answer your question. Queen Sweep writes in and says, should AMD have pushed harder to get the new AM5 APUs out on the market before CES? I know they couldn't have predicted the RAM apocalypse. Some people did, but I feel like they're going to either be dead on arrival due to RAM costs or delayed into irrelevance when they release in 2026. Mm, it depends on if you get a good deal. Because I already showed you with what was it, Micro Center, that they have bundles where you can get like a CPU with RAM with a motherboard. So even if you're not getting the fastest RAM, no, I mean, I think APUs could still be the way to go this year. And then you just bundle that at Micro Center. But otherwise, I guess the problem I have with your question, Clean Sweep, is you're like, should they have launched this sooner because of RAM? That applies to everything. It's not just the APUs. I bet Valve wishes they were able to launch the Steam machine in like, July last year. I bet they wish they did. hmm So I don't think it's just the APUs. And I think APUs on desktop are fun, but ultimately, everybody, they're pretty niche. Like most companies with like mini PCs are, just buying, something like this for like a workstation. Um, they're not buying an AM5 system and putting that in there. They're just bulk buying like mobile processors that are in a motherboard or something. So, you know, that I don't think most people buy the AM5 APUs and really use them that much. And frankly, and I've reported this already, I think that Strix Halo, Gorgon Halo, no, I'm sorry, Strix Point, Gorgon Point. In my experience, I'm actually testing a Gorgon system right now. They really suffer in integrated graphics if you don't have the fastest memory. Like if I pull up a benchmark right here, like what it was crazy. This is only in Metro Exodus, which likes bandwidth, so keep that in mind. And there are some examples where it's different, but I found that an AI9 370, so this is one of the top Strix Point products, that in a mini PC with DDR5 7500, it got 45 frames per second in this Metro Exodus edition benchmark. And then the same CPU with, uh, and by the way, that was at 54 watts, a 65 watt AI9 370 with DDR5 5600, that got 33 frames per second. So we are talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 40, 45% more performance going from 5600 to 7500 DDR5 in that game. It's wild how much you really need more than that. Now, I don't know, maybe that's a fluke or something. Maybe something was wrong with that system, but I don't think so because I double tested it and I've seen that in other Strix systems as well. In fact, I found that an A840U, that is my Minis Forum tablet, a 28 watt hot point because it had DDR5 6400 performed about the same in some games compared to Strix Point. So all of you people that are saying stuff like, I want Strix, now Gorgon on AM5, my response to you is, are you going to buy DDR5 7000 and get it to run with it? Because that's kind of what you need to do for Strix to work well as an APU. And I think there's a reason we've seen AMD pretty much limit their APUs on desktop so far to like Phoenix and Hawkpoint. It's because those don't need the memory to be that fast to get the most out of it. They still suffer. I still have a Hawkpoint system that I tested that lost by like 5%, and it was using 64 watts versus a 28 watt tablet with Hawkpoint simply because its RAM was like 15% slower. So with APUs, you need fast memory. And I think AMD knows that it'd be pretty hard to get a good AM5 system for a reasonable price with Strix Point because you need to get to about DDR5 8000 for that thing to actually be performing, like a 2050 or like a mobile 3050 at max Q or something. And so I think they're kind of waiting for Medusa because from what I've heard, you should be able to fit at least Medusa Point on AM5 and possibly Medusa Halo Mini. Possibly. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I've had people suggest Medusa Halo Mini. That's the 24 compute unit, I think 14 core APU, that might fit on AM5. And if it does, yeah, look, it's going to suffer performance a lot if you are using DDR5 6000. But my guess would be Zen 6 can more easily run faster memory, so maybe you can get away with getting DDR5 8000 for it. And also, RDNA 5 is way, way, way better at using less bandwidth than clearly RDNA 3.5 is. And so because of that, I would suggest that that's probably why AMD's dragged their feet with a lot of these APUs. Who knows? Maybe benchmarks will come out. There's just something wrong with the mini PCs I tested, but I'm pretty sure I've seen that repeated in other people's testing. And so, yeah, I think AMD is dragging their feet with the Zen 5 APUs on AM5 because they're not that much better than the Zen 4 ones unless you have crazy fast memory. And they might as well wait to just bring out the Medusa APUs that probably can make do with less. At least that's what I think is probably going on there. So we got more console questions. Alexander writes in and says, "Hey Tom, would you consider adding a page on your website that's basically a cheat sheet for recent leaks? Not picturing anything fancy, just like whatever's easiest to keep updated. I'm thinking at minimum something like latest info released on Zen 7 with links and quick summaries. I had this thought after listening to a podcast where you yourself had to spend a minute or two searching to find which video had the latest info you'd shared on a particular topic. I often can't remember what the latest is and will end up asking on the Discord. A simple, easy to update spreadsheet. Yeah, it's something Carbon Cry has suggested we should do. I don't know. You have to understand that the amount of haters out there, I just worry it'd be used as a bludgeon to attack me or something. So that's I'm just being honest with you. That's what I worry about. And I worry about having the time to do it because I say lots of little things. Like, what if we forget to add it this one day? And then people are like, see, he's wrong. And it's like, no, we just didn't add the newest video. It's much easier for me to respond to people by just taking those 2 minutes every time than it might be if we completely missed adding something one week. At least that's how I think about it. But, I understand that's a feature a lot of people have asked for. So I'll think about it. All right, let's see here. All right, we got more console questions. So let me put down a timestamp for this. Oh, yeah. RAM and next gen. And this will probably dovetail nicely into the final Patreon reader mails I've had sent in. Okay. So R1, let's see here. R1NG Master writes in again, thank you for the tip, and says, how much are you expecting the crisis with RAM to affect PS6 and Magnus when they launch in late 2027? Your bomb expected lower RAM costs in larger amounts. Correct. All I can say is ask me in a year. Again, I've said this over and over. Ask me in a year. That's when I will know how much things will be affected. Do I think by now this will raise prices some compared to what they really wanted? Probably, but I don't know. What if I'm told actually Sony's going to get one hell of a deal buying 100 million RAM chips over a few years, and they negotiated down to 2025 prices after the RAM apocalypse started ending late this year? I don't know. It's just too soon for me to say. At this point, I would say, yeah, I'd be very skeptical Magnus is going to be $800. I guess we'll say that though, right? I think we can say that the lowest estimates that I thought of are probably not going to happen at this point, but I'm not sure. And I would say you've got to ask me in a year. Set a timer. Ask me in February of 2027 what I think. That's when you need to ask me. Shake Capo writes and says, now that we're in 2026, any new info from sources on PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution 2 on the PS5 Pro, release it, and will it be a silent rollout or they drop it with a lot of patch games that have PSSR 2 support? I think there will be some fanfare. I don't know how much, but no, I don't think it'll be a silent release. And again, this is just me estimating. No sources told me this, but I get the sense that they will want to have some games ready at launch. I do. Which games? I mean, come on, probably what? Ghost of Yotai, God of War could really use an update to PSSR 2. I know that has some frame rate cap issues if you turn on PSSR. Ones that I saw, I actually didn't turn on PSSR with God of War Ragnarok because I thought it looked fine without it, and it made my frame rate on average actually a little lower. So yeah, I think there's plenty of candidates that are first party. They'll want that in The Last of Us remaster part 2. Right? They'll probably want a handful of games that they can show off next. Ratchet and Clank, everyone's favorite showcase for FSR and different upscaling techniques, right? I'm sure they'll be preparing that stuff. Kami no writes in, Lisa didn't mention PS6 for 2027. Will it be delayed? Ask me in a year. These decisions have not been made yet. They have not been made yet. What I will say is this, though. If AMD is confident Xbox Magnus will launch next year, do you think Sony will want to give Xbox a launch without competition? I don't know. I find that unlikely. We'll see, though. Phil the Trucker writes in and said, would FSR4 on RDNA 3 and 3.5 fix the memory controller inefficiency being easy when to push back with Intel? Oh, nah, these problems are harder to fix than just releasing Zen 6. So I think you're confusing something that I talked about, Phil, which thank you for writing in. I brought up on my podcast a few times now that the Fox, watch the new episode with Just Josh. By the way, that episode's flying a bit under the radar, and yet a lot of the comments are saying that's one of their favorite episodes of all time. Please go watch the episode with Just Josh. In fact, let me pull it up just to plug the thumbnail, everybody. But yeah, shameless plug for my own content here. Please listen to this one. I think this is one of the best episodes we've done. When I say we, I mean just Moore's Law is Dead in general. So please check this out. But in that episode, I brought up, amongst other episodes, I also brought this up, that the Fox has suggested that Strix Halo seems pretty inefficient with how it handles the boosting of its memory controller below 20 watts, and that perhaps a Gorgon Halo could fix this, or an update, right? Like a firmware update or something. I don't know for sure. I'm not an expert on that. I would divert to whatever the Fox said and just say, hey, it's what he said. He's probably right, but I don't know myself. That has really nothing to do with FSR4 and RNA 3 and 3.5, right? Like, those are just two separate. I'm talking about memory boosting characteristics of Strix Halo. FSR4 is over here. And by the way, we already know FSR4 works on RDNA 3. We already know. Hackers have put it on there. So no, the only thing stopping AMD from putting FSR4 on previous gen architectures is that they're worried about what it will cost to keep updating a separate path for years, which I think is a stupid excuse because, I just think it's doable. I think it's a stupid excuse, and I think it's worth it. Were Gorgon Point and Gorgon Halo to be coming out at the same time, like let's say Gorgon Halo already launched with Gorgon Point this month, and they both had RDNA 4 compute units. I'd say it's a little bit more up for debate how important this is, but they are going to be having RDNA 3.5, the main APU architecture for their graphics, for the next like 3 years or something, or at least the next year or two. No, like they need to add FSR4 support, and it's just because they don't want to. They don't want to. Markman writes in and says, I know this is heresy, but I'd be more interested in a PS6 handheld if it could also play PC games via Steam. The PS3 stuff is also crappy, like not having backwards compatibility. Yeah, sure. With PS3, who knows? Maybe they'll make that a feature of the PS6. Can hope. I think I suggested that's possible. Oh no, wait, no, I didn't. I said that would be a fun thing for them to do when I was talking to Colin Moriarty on his podcast years ago. But recently I've said that there's no mention of PS3 backwards compatibility in documents. Almost made an oopsie with what I said there. So no, unfortunately, I think they just plan to remaster everything. And actually, I believe Colin and me talked about this on a Sacred Symbols as well. That by now, I don't know if PS3 backwards compatibility makes sense. It's too long. I'm sorry, the PS3 launched 20 years ago. Yeah, 19, almost 20 years ago, right? Wasn't it 2000? Was it? No, it was 20 years, 2006. So the PS3 is 20 years old. At this point, they've already remastered more than just Demon Souls. Honestly, I think at this point, they just need to go back and say there's like 10 games that would make everyone happy if we remastered. They've already remastered Uncharted games, The Last of Us 1,000 times. The yearly I almost said remastered of Us, which is what The Last of Us is. They do a remaster every year. But no, I think at this point they just need to go back and like what's really left to remaster? Like Folklore? Anyone remember that deep cut? Resistance 1 and 2, Killzone 2, Infamous games. I think that's it. I think there's probably like 20 games total they could remaster for PS6. That is what I suggested they should do, and give it ray tracing and call it a day. Like that makes more sense to me, honestly, to just go back and do that by now because it's been so long. So, anyways, your other thing here, you're no more interested in the PS6 handheld if it could play PC games via Steam. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. A PlayStation's a PlayStation, just like a Nintendo's a Nintendo. It is what it is. But wasn't there a rumor that Sony was considering putting Steam on PlayStation 5 or 6 or something? And I remember covering that and going, I don't see any evidence in the back end that that's happening. Having said that, if they did that, it would be because they had some deal with Steam and they want to combat Xbox Magnus being a PC. And they're like, we'll give you a discount or something. You get a deal on both things. So I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, if you could play Mario on a PlayStation, you'd want it more. But let's remember, PlayStations are PlayStations and Nintendos are Nintendos still, for the most part. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm starting to ramble here, to be honest. Getting a little bit tired. So I think I've gotten through the tipped questions. We have some final supply. God, I almost can't even talk. Final supply questions here. Imagining at this point, a lot of the people watching this are just like, let's see as Tom's brain deteriorates as he gets tired after talking for 2 hours straight. All right. Final things. RAM and supply. If you have any more questions, I'm clearly getting tired. Put them in now. Last chance, whether you're in the Moore's Laws at Discord and the after video chat thread, which again, you can get access to for just the $2 tier, or in the live chat right now. Put them in. All right, final. Let me see. I probably don't even need a timestamp for this. Clean Sweep writes in, how much of an effect does metal price increases for computer components have on projections that PC part prices will trend downwards in Q3? With the timeline slipped to Q4, yeah, that could affect that. I don't know. I think things are just going to be expensive this year, pretty much, but RAM could maybe get a little better by the end of the year, but other prices, like motherboard prices, are going to go up and stuff. Like, it sucks. Precious metals going up is going to hurt everything. Yeah, it'll affect it. Magnetic Manol writes in and says, looks like Nvidia is walking away from gaming GPUs, at least in the short term, because the profit isn't high enough. No, it's because they overbooked AI capacity. Nvidia wants 70% of gross margins, but AMD is very happy with 50% or more long term. Could 2026, I guess invertedly, it's still about profit, but just keep in mind, it's not just like them saying it's not worth it. If Nvidia could, they would make more graphics cards for gamers and for AI. The problem is TSMC has become a bottleneck there. That's the most accurate way to put it. But he says, could 2026 finally be the year that AMD and Intel, no, not Intel, top management gets serious about consumer GPUs instead of treating them like a distraction from the more important CPU business? I think this is the year AMD, if they're smart, pushes Gorgon Halo and Gorgon Point hard in like $1,500 and less soldered RAM laptops. Because from what I'm hearing, the price is a lot better right now in the market than if you tried to actually use SODIMM kits. So there's an opportunity here with Panther Lake being so expensive that you could sell, DDR5 7500 laptops with Gorgon Point for like half the price of Panther Lake, and that's how you take market share, right? Most of AMD's market share gains in laptop is from, believe it or not, like Mendocino and Rembrandt rebrands, like the 7735HS, those type of laptops. That's what's taking more market share from Intel right now than Strix or soon Gorgon. It's not the cutting edge, it's their 1 year, 2 year. Mendocino uses Zen 2. They're older rebrands. That's really what's taking it. So from that perspective, I would think that if they take market share this year, it's going to be because they push those SoCs of Gorgon Point that have 32 gigs, Gorgon Halo of 32 gigs, and they push that hard. It's not going to be because of graphics this year. Now, next year that might change. Like, let's say the rumors are right that Nvidia doesn't launch the RTX 50 series, 60 series, until 2028. Yeah, there's maybe room for AMD to take market share. Now, to be fair, it'd still be mostly a 2028 thing because I do not hear that RDNA 5 will be ready at the very beginning of next year for desktop or something, right? From what I've read, mid 2027 is the earliest you're going to see RDNA 5 dedicated GPUs. But if Nvidia launches and again, this is hypothetical, I'm not saying I'm sure of this. Let's say Nvidia launches RTX 50 Super beginning of 27 and then doesn't launch RTX 60 until the next year. If 50 Super goes against big RDNA 5, it's going to be a bloodbath. I don't care how much they overclock a 5090 Ti. How much can they even, by the way? It's like pulling 700 watts or something, isn't it? Like, or 600 watts. Like, even if they do that and they can juice 20% more performance out of a 5090 Ti, even if they manage to do that, RDNA 7 is going to probably double 5090 performance or something. Like RDNA 5 is going to double 5090 performance or something. Like it's going to be a lot more. They're going to like 150 compute. They're over doubling compute units from the 9070. So yeah. All right. Don't quote me as saying they will for sure double 5090, but I'd say double, probably at least 5080 with big RDNA 5. So if that goes against a 5090 Ti, and by the way, the AMD graphics card will probably use 350 to 450 watts. And then if NVIDIA has some 750 watt 5090 Ti, that's going to be a bloodbath. And if they can make enough graphics cards, maybe they take market share from NVIDIA. But that's quite a while from now. And so far in history, we've seen NVIDIA doesn't usually let AMD do that easily, so like they're willing to let AMD get away with probably taking a small amount of market share this year simply to serve their AI customers. But I'd find it unlikely that NVIDIA doesn't respond in some way. But there could be an opening there because NVIDIA has to supply. I think the screen just flashed there. Everything okay, everybody? NVIDIA has to supply their AI customers first. And AMD has to have RDNA 5 come out by the end of next year. RDNA 5 is in Xbox Magnus. It's in the PS6, but most importantly, Xbox Magnus shares chiplets with dedicated RDNA 5. Um, so they kind of have to launch RDNA 5 next year, and Nvidia doesn't have to launch the 60 series. So that is the one thing I would say to you, Magnetic Manual. Thank you for being a patron. You know, technically AMD has to get RDNA 5 out next year. It's it. They share chiplets between the dedicated graphics, the APUs, and console. So it will come out no matter what Nvidia does. So I think that's worth worth mentioning that yes, there could be a small amount of time where Nvidia doesn't really have an answer, which would be interesting. Magnetic Manual writes in again and says, "Do you have any insight into the DRAM pricing difference by big OEMs like Dell and HP? They pay compared to component vendors like Corsair and G.Skill. Laptop RAM upgrades don't seem drastically more expensive than the normally high upcharge, while Corsair DIMMs seem 3 to 4 times the price compared to free shortage." Let's see this. No, I got an HP Z2 Mini Strix Halo 128 gigabyte system for $1,600 on Black Friday. See, I'm seeing people get Strix Halo systems sometimes now for like 1,700 or less. It's a deal, but I'm just saying it's cheaper than Panther. Like, but anyways, which was roughly the cost of the DIMM kit alone. I can't imagine HP took a huge loss on that. So, like, no, what? Yeah, but remember, if your Strix Halo APU has the RAM built onto it and was manufactured last year and manufactured before Black Friday, so that's why those prices could be where they were. Um, are OEMs paying less for RAM than us? Yeah, I don't know what it is though. They are paying decently less, from what I'm told. Let me see here. Yeah, so they are, but I just don't know how much. Sorry, I was looking at something a source sent me. Brad Medlin writes and it says, with RAM prices as high as they are, do you foresee consumer PC and component shipments slipping more, driving demand down, or does this just shift the supplies more to the AI data center side of things? No, I think if AI demand goes down, it's because the AI bubble's popping. I don't think it's because of the RAM thing. These people will pay whatever they can to expand capacity if they care. They have to stop caring about AI to stop doing it. Relatively speaking, these costs are not a big deal to them compared to like us consumers. Um, just yeah. So no. Now, will PC demand go down this year? Yes. There's just only so much a lot of people are going to pay for some things. Demand's going to go down. I'm also told that's a major reason. I mean, it's obvious, but I think I should maybe state the obvious. That's also a major reason why Nvidia cut 50 series production this year, is they just think people are going to buy less PCs in general because of the RAM shortage, and so that they would also rather focus on AI, where it's a guaranteed sale, as opposed to keeping GPUs near MSRP, where people are building less desktops. Phil the Trucker writes in and says, with the uncertainty around RAM prices and FSR, would it make sense for Valve to delay the hardware launch 9 to 12 months while slowly buying stock as it becomes available to maintain partnership relationships? Yes, but not probably 9 to 12 months. This is why I think they're kind of slightly delaying it, is to make sure they have a constant trickle of supply, so they don't, again, like sell 1 million consoles in February and then have nothing to sell until October. They'd probably have some launch in June and trickle out until October when they get more supply, if they do hypothetically get it in October, so that people don't just forget this thing exists. Okay, so I think that's everything there. Oh, and one more thing. This was a very last minute thing that a source sent me, but I think it's important, and I am going to ask everybody to share this. Actually, this source wants me to have you share this. So if you waited to the last minute here to still watch, you're actually getting something, and it has to do with crucial memory. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to do some hedging here, because these companies love to do little things where they come out, change what they're doing, and then say I was wrong. But I've got some people in retail saying that Crucial isn't honoring RMAs. I know that Crucial, the brand itself, is going away. Well, I'm just letting you know. If you own Crucial products, look into how easy it is to RMA your stuff right now, because at least according to multiple people in retail, they're starting to have a hard time RMAing RAM sticks, which Crucial said they would still honor warranties, I believe, even if they stopped selling the RAM, right? You can still find Crucial on store shelves. I've got some mini PCs I'm testing. I took them apart. Crucial memories in them. If it breaks, can we RMA it? Get that out there. Spread the word. See if journalists out there can ask Crucial about this, because I've specifically been asked by some of my sources to tell you all they're having trouble RMA and Crucial memory kits, and that there might be some funny business going on. If what happens is we learn they were wrong, they'll be happy. They just want to know how, because they're being denied, and it's starting to become very hard to find the way to do it. Um, so yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's actually anti-consumer stuff, by the way, when you say you're going to do something and then don't support your products. All right, let me see. Any final questions here? Don't really see much. Don't insult folklore. It's fantastic. I wasn't insulting it. I'm just saying that's a deep cut, right? Who talks about folklore? Also, there's Lair, all the kill zones, Haze. Okay, we're going to disagree that Haze is a good game. For those who don't know, Haze was hyped up as this Halo killer. It sucked. In fact, if there was, I think it would like deserve like a how did this get made type podcast going over how silly it was. I got it for like years after it came out. I was staying with some friends in Pennsylvania, and I was like, hey, why don't we Amazon Haze and we can play it co-op just to see how crappy this game is. We did. It was like $4. Like I Amazoned Haze for $4, put it in a PS3, and we were laughing at the acting, how weird some things were. There were levels where we had no idea where to go. It was I don't think Sony's going to remaster Haze. Let's put it that way. Now the other ones, they're fine, so oh, we got one more tipped question here. Would you expect other companies' pricing to decrease to drive sales, or increase to squeeze as much of the individual consumer that are? Again, guys, when they raise and lower prices, it isn't always some evil monopoly man thing. It is sometimes, but sometimes it's because it costs them more to make this right now. But would I expect other component pricing to decrease? Yeah, like I think monitors might continue to get cheaper short term. Long term, I don't know. Precious metal prices are going to make everything go up to a degree, but no, I don't think anyone's going to like. So I guess if your question is this, your question is, would Asus cut the price of their motherboards in half, hoping that makes up for the RAM prices so you still buy their motherboards? There's going to be some of that. Some component manufacturers will lower costs if there's less demand because they have to move product. But long term, I don't really see them trying something like that, right? At scale forever. Like, just because, again, precious metals are going up, and like prices are actually going up. So I think short term, yes, for some stuff, but for the most part, actually, the sad thing is no, I don't. The best thing you can hope for is more things like those micro center deals that I showed, where they're giving you bundles to bring you in the door that make it so the RAM apocalypse actually isn't really a thing if you get that deal. That's the stuff you should probably be looking for. Because I mentioned Hayes more as it was a notable exclusive. Well, still, I don't know. Notable, notable is an oddity. I don't know. Yeah, someone should tell Steve at Gamers Nexus about the crucial RMA issue. And by the way, if he talks about that right after this, can some of you ask him to give me credit once? Because he seems to refuse to. So it would be nice if he would once give me credit. But let me see here. To run full PCs. Are ARM chips powerful enough to run full PC games while being passively cooled? No. No, guys. How are those Qualcomm ARM chips doing running games? Come on. Will the 6060 have 5090 performance with 6 times frame gen? Probably. That's probably what they will say. Yeah. Micro Center always counts on you buying something else there when you get the special. They don't. They hope you do. You don't have to. That deal is still a good deal. A deal is a deal, man. Don't get mad at the deal. And by the way, that's still a good deal. A really good deal. Like, even if you bought other stuff with it, I wouldn't get mad at them for giving you stuff for a fair price. Is it actually PS6? Yes, it runs PS5 games. Have heard from other people with who's other people? I think I'm going to start refusing to answer questions where people say, I'm hearing people say, who? Say the name. Are you afraid if you say the name of the person who said it, I'm not going to take it seriously? Well, if that's the case, then there's probably a reason I'm not taking it seriously. Like, are you going to say Gamers Nexus leak? Because if Gamers Nexus has a leak, You all in the comments say, Gamers Nexus said this, and then I go, oh, well, let me look into that. Right? You don't like, or who's the guy? Was it at Wired or The Verge? Or I'm blanking on this journalist, but he has a lot of good leaks that are accurate. You always seem to say the names if it's a reputable name. Why are you saying I'm hearing? I bet you didn't hear it from Gamers Nexus, because if you did, you would have said Gamers Nexus, wouldn't you have? So I'm not answering questions, like about, like, say who it is. All right. Say who said it, or I'm gonna assume you got it from like some guy by the corner store. Uh duh, 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 duh. All right. I think that's gonna do it. I'm rambling. I'm tired. Please get the word out that it, some retailers are at least telling me they're having trouble RMAing crucial memory. If you tell people, try to insist they give me credit. I'm trying to help you consumers. The least you could do is give me credit when I try to help you. But otherwise, like the video, share the video, please comment down below and share all the other stuff. There's like a dozen leaks in this. And I think I did a pretty good job of outlining what you should expect with RAM component prices, shortages. The Steam machine thing, I think, was actually pretty big. That wasn't even in the title. Please share that as well. And, everyone right now, there's about 1,000 of you still watching. Click to see if you're subscribed to Moore's Law is Dead, and click subscribe if you're not. A lot of recent videos I've checked, half of you aren't subscribed. That does help engagement. That does help me get recommended in the algorithm. And then, of course, also join the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon. You could still have time to submit questions for the next Broken Silicon. In terms of people I have coming, I've got, I think Fan the Decks, an upcoming guest. I've got High Yield probably coming on soon. You can ask us questions at the lowest tier if you join us on Patreon as well. So please join the Patreon. New Die Shrink comes out tomorrow for patrons. Otherwise, I'm exhausted. Have a good weekend, everybody.